Episode 29. The Peace of Not Forcing What Is Not Ready. Welcome back, Reasonauts. My name still isn't important. The message is, every day is awesome. We just have to get through it. And before we begin, if these conversations have been meaningful to you, subscribe and stay with us each week. Share this episode with someone who may need it. And join us on Facebook. Not for noise, not for attention, just a place where people learning to grow do not have to do it alone. This episode is dedicated to the ones who are learning that care does not always mean control, to the ones who have done their part, spoken the truth, held the boundary, offered the help, and still had to release the outcome, to the ones who are tired from trying to make life arrive faster than it was ready to come, and to the ones learning that peace is not always getting the answer today. Sometimes peace is finally no longer fighting with the fact that the answer has not arrived. Last week, we talked about letting people learn without saving them, about the difference between helping someone and becoming their life, about caring without carrying, loving without replacing, warning without controlling, and allowing people to meet the weight. That may be trying to teach them how to stand, but after you stop trying to save everyone, another pressure can appear. You may stop carrying the person, but still try to control the outcome. You may stop rescuing them, but still want the lesson to land on your timeline. You may say, "This is not mine to carry," but inside you are still gripping the result, still waiting for them to change, still waiting for the answer to arrive, still waiting for the door to open, still waiting for life to prove that your patience was worth it. So today, we are talking about the peace of not forcing what is not ready, not giving up, not pretending you do not care, not becoming passive, but learning how to release the timeline without releasing your integrity, learning how to stay present without pushing, how to care without gripping, how to remain honest without dragging life into a shape it is not ready to hold. Because soft strength is not only the ability to stand. Sometimes soft strength is the ability to wait without turning waiting into control. There is a quiet kind of forcing that does not always look like forcing. It does not always yell. It does not always demand. It does not always grab the wheel. Sometimes forcing looks patient on the outside, but anxious underneath. Sometimes it looks like checking again, explaining again, hinting again, bringing it up again, trying to create the perfect sentence that finally makes someone understand. Sometimes forcing sounds gentle. It says, "I'm just trying to help. I'm just trying to be clear. I'm just trying to make sure they see it. I'm just trying to move things forward." And maybe you are. Maybe your intention is clean. Maybe your heart is in the right place. Maybe you really do see something that would help. But even a good intention can begin moving with pressure when patience runs out. And that is where we have to become honest, because not all pressure is loud. Some pressure is quiet. Some pressure is emotional. Some pressure is spiritual. Some pressure is the energy beneath the words. You can say the right thing with the wrong movement behind it. You can offer help while secretly trying to control the response. You can give space while silently punishing someone for needing time. You can say, "Take your time," while your nervous system is already tapping its foot. That matters, because people can often feel the pressure, even when the words sound calm. They can feel when your patience is not really patience. They can feel when your silence is waiting to become accusation. They can feel when your support is tied to an expectation they did not agree to carry. And sometimes, without realizing it, we call that love. But love and pressure are not the same movement. Love can speak truth. Love can set boundaries. Love can say no. Love can leave when something is no longer clean. But love does not need to force itself into the place where timing still has work to do. That is hard, because when we see clearly, we want movement. When we finally understand something, we want the whole room to understand it too. When we finally see the pattern, we want the pattern to stop now, not tomorrow, not next season, not after more damage, now. And sometimes that urgency makes sense. Sometimes the cost is real. Sometimes the pattern is dangerous. Sometimes waiting is not wisdom. Sometimes action is necessary. So this is not about becoming inactive. It is not about calling delay spiritual. It is not about standing still when movement is clearly required. This is about the moments where you have done what was yours to do. You spoke, you warned, you offered, you clarified, you held the boundary, you told the truth, you stepped back from carrying, and still, something inside you keeps reaching, not because there is more to bring, but because you cannot stand the space between what you see and what has not changed yet. That space is uncomfortable, the space between clarity and outcome, the space between truth and readiness, the space between planting and fruit, the space between saying what needed to be said and watching whether life receives it. That space can make us feel powerless. And many times when we feel powerless, we start forcing, we push, we repeat, we over-explain, we monitor, we interpret every small change. We search for evidence that something is finally happening. We look for signs. We listen for tone. We measure distance. We replay conversations. We ask ourselves, did they get it? Did it matter? Are they changing? Was I clear enough? Should I say it again? Should I try one more time? And sometimes the answer may be yes, but many times the answer is no. Not because you do not care, because the movement is no longer yours. You already brought what was yours. Now the next part belongs to time, to readiness, to consequence, to their choice, to life moving in ways you cannot control. And that is where soft strength begins to feel different, because it is not only strength in action, it is strength after action. The strength to stop pushing after you have moved cleanly, the strength to let the seed sit in the ground without digging it up every day to see if it grew, the strength to let silence do its work, the strength to let another person process without demanding immediate evidence, the strength to stop needing the outcome to arrive right now so you can finally feel safe. That is not easy, because many of us learn that waiting is dangerous. We learn that if we do not act quickly, things fall apart. We learn that if we do not manage the room, someone will explode. We learn that if we do not explain ourselves enough, we will be misunderstood. We learn that if we do not keep checking, we will be abandoned. We learn that if we do not stay alert, life will surprise us with pain. So forcing can feel like protection. It can feel like responsibility. It can feel like wisdom. But sometimes forcing is fear trying to dress like leadership. Sometimes it is anxiety trying to call itself discernment. Sometimes it is old survival, trying to manage new movement. That is why we have to ask, what is moving inside me right now? Is this wisdom or fear? Is this clarity or control? Is this love or anxiety? Is this responsibility, or am I trying to make the outcome happen so I can finally feel settled? That question matters, because the same action can come from two very different movements. You can speak from clarity, or you can speak from panic. You can ask a question from curiosity, or you can ask it from control. You can set a boundary from truth, or you can set it from punishment. You can wait from peace, or you can wait while silently gripping the result. From the outside, it may look the same, but inside, the movement is different, and Human Velocity X keeps bringing us back to the movement. Not just what you did, not just what you said, not just what it looked like, what was moving through you. Because if fear is moving through you, it will eventually shape the way your love feels. If control is moving through you, it will eventually shape the way your help feels. If anxiety is moving through you, it will eventually shape the way your patience feels. And if peace is moving through you, not fake peace, not distance, not numbness, but rooted peace, then even your waiting begins to feel different. It becomes cleaner, less demanding, less desperate, less tied to whether the result arrives exactly when you hoped. That is what we are learning, not how to stop wanting good things, but how to stop gripping them so tightly that our hands can no longer move cleanly. There are things in life that cannot be rushed into readiness. You can create the conditions. You can offer light. You can water the ground. You can remove what is blocking growth. You can protect what is tender, but you cannot command fruit by being impatient with the seed. And that image matters because many of us are harsh with what is still forming in ourselves, in others, in relationships, in purpose, in healing, in faith, in direction. We want the thing to be ready. because we are ready to stop feeling uncertain. We want the answer now because not knowing feels like weakness. We want the person to change now because watching them repeat the pattern hurts. We want the relationship to become clear now because ambiguity is exhausting. We want the door to open now because waiting makes us question ourselves. But some things are not late, they are forming. And forming can look like nothing from the outside. A seed under the ground does not look like progress. It looks buried, it looks hidden, it looks still. But stillness is not always absence. Sometimes stillness is process. Sometimes what looks like nothing is structure becoming strong enough to hold what will eventually emerge. That is true in people too. Someone may be processing something long before they can say it clearly. Someone may be changing before their behavior is fully caught up. Someone may be grieving an old version of themselves before they know how to become new. Someone may be hearing the truth, but not yet have the courage to live what they heard. That does not mean you must wait forever. That does not mean you ignore the fruit. That does not mean you keep giving access to something harmful. Just because someone says they are trying. Discernment still matters. Boundaries still matter. Truth still matters. But there is a difference between discernment and impatience. Discernment watches the fruit. Impatience keeps pulling at the branch. Discernment asks, what is actually growing here? Impatience asks, why is this not what I wanted yet? Discernment can wait without abandoning truth. Impatience often uses truth as a tool to rush what is not ready. That is the difference. And if we do not see it, we can damage the very thing we say we want to help. We can overwater, overcorrect, overexplain, overmanage. We can turn our care into pressure. We can turn our hope into expectation. We can turn our clarity into a deadline that life never agreed to. And then we become frustrated when the thing does not bloom under the weight of our demand. But not everything responds to pressure by becoming healthier. Some things close, some things harden. Some things perform for a while and then collapse. Some people say what we want to hear just to get the pressure off them. Some relationships appear to improve because everyone is tired of fighting, not because truth is actually entered. Some decisions get made too early because waiting felt unbearable. And later, we realize we did not create readiness. We created reaction. That is not clean movement. Clean movement respects timing without worshiping timing. It does not use patience as an excuse to avoid truth, but it also does not use truth as an excuse to force timing. It says, I will bring what is mine to bring. I will say what is mine to say. I will choose what is mine to choose. And then I will let the next part belong where it belongs. That may be the hardest part, letting the next part belong where it belongs. Because once you release the outcome, you have to face yourself again. You have to ask, who am I when I am not forcing? Who am I when I cannot make the answer come faster? Who am I when I have done my part and still have to wait? Who am I when the result is not proof yet? Who am I when life is still forming and I have to live responsibly inside the uncertainty? That is where patience becomes more than waiting. Patience becomes character, not passive waiting, not helpless waiting, not silent resentment wearing a calm face. Real patience is active. It keeps your hands clean. It keeps your heart alive. It keeps your movement honest. It lets you remain faithful to what is true without trying to drag the future into the present before it is ready to arrive. There is a kind of forcing that happens inside ourselves too, and we need to talk about that because it is not always someone else. We are trying to rush. Sometimes it is us. We want to be healed already. We want to be over it already. We want to forgive already. We want to understand already. We want to stop being triggered, stop being tired, stop being afraid, stop needing time, stop being human. We say, I should be past this by now. I already know better. I already talked about this. I already prayed about this. I already learned this lesson. Why is this still affecting me? And underneath those questions, there can be shame because some part of us believes that once we understand something, we should immediately be free from it. But understanding is not always the same as integration. Seeing the pattern does not mean your whole body has stopped responding to it. Naming the wound does not mean the wound has fully healed. Knowing the truth does not mean every old fear disappears on command. There are layers. The mind may see something first. The heart may need time to trust it. The body may need even more time to stop bracing for what used to happen. That is not failure. That is integration. And integration cannot be bullied into existence. You cannot shame yourself into healing faster. You cannot punish yourself into peace. You cannot insult your nervous system until it feels safe. You cannot force tenderness by hating the parts of you that are still afraid. Soft strength toward others has to also become soft strength toward yourself. Firm, but not cruel. Honest, but not abusive. Patient, but not avoidant. You can tell yourself the truth without turning truth into a weapon. You can say, this pattern is not healthy, without saying, I am terrible for having it. You can say, I need to grow, without saying, I should be ashamed that I'm not there yet. You can say, this reaction belongs to an old wound, without mocking yourself for still feeling it, because healing that is forced often becomes performance. You start acting healed because you are tired of needing time. You start using the right language while the body is still bracing. You start saying, I'm fine, because you are embarrassed that you are not. You start presenting peace instead of practicing it, and eventually, the unhealed place finds a way to speak. Maybe through resentment, maybe through exhaustion, maybe through numbness, maybe through sudden anger, maybe through control, maybe through a collapse you did not see coming. That is why we do not force what is still forming. Not in other people, not in ourselves. Because real growth has to become strong enough to carry the life that will be built on top of it. If the roots are shallow, the first storm will reveal it. So let the roots form. Let the lessons settle. Let the body catch up. Let the heart ask its questions. Let the mind learn patience. That does not mean you stop moving. It means you stop abusing movement as a way to avoid uncertainty. Sometimes the cleanest movement is smaller than you want it. One honest sentence, one boundary, one day of not returning to the old pattern, one pause before reaction, one refusal to chase, one moment of rest without calling yourself lazy, one choice to keep your heart open without handing it to what has not earned access. That counts. That is movement. And movement does not have to be dramatic to be real. There is also a grief in not forcing, because forcing gives us the illusion that we are still in control. Even when it is exhausting, it gives us something to do, something to push, something to manage, something to measure, something to think about when silence feels too wide. But when you stop forcing, you may feel the grief underneath, the grief of not being able to make someone understand, the grief of not being able to make timing obey, the grief of not being able to make healing arrive faster, the grief of not being able to make the door open just because you finally feel ready, the grief of realizing that your clarity does not command the world, that grief is real and it deserves honesty, because sometimes we keep forcing, not because the force is working, but because stopping would make us feel the sadness we have been outrunning. If I stop pushing this person, I may have to admit they are not ready. If I stop chasing this answer, I may have to admit I do not know yet. If I stop trying to control this outcome, I may have to feel powerless. If I stop proving, I may have to sit with the fear that I am not believed. If I stop managing everything, I may have to face the fact that I am tired. Sometimes forcing is not about the outcome. Sometimes forcing is how we avoid the grief of our own limits. But limits are not failure. Limits are truth. You are not life. You are not time. You are not another person's readiness. You are not the author of every outcome. You are a participant, a steward, a person responsible for your movement, not the owner of every result. That truth can feel humbling, but it can also become freeing, because if you are not the owner of every result, then every result does not get to define you. If someone does not change, that does not automatically mean you failed. If the door does not open, that does not automatically mean your movement was wrong. If healing takes longer, that does not mean you are broken. If the answer has not arrived, that does not mean nothing is happening. Sometimes life is working where you cannot see. Sometimes timing is protecting what your urgency would mishandle. Sometimes the delay is not denial. Sometimes a closed door is not rejection. Sometimes what feels slow is actually being strengthened. And sometimes, yes, a delay is a no. Sometimes a closed door is a closed door. Sometimes the fruit tells the truth, that it is time to stop waiting there. That is why this is not about pretending. Soft strength does not ignore reality. It watches the fruit. It listens to the body. It honors the pattern. It tells the truth. It does not force, but it also does not fantasize. It can say, this is not ready yet. And it can also say, this may never become what I hoped. Both require strength, because one asks you to wait with patience, the other asks you to release with honesty. And sometimes, the peace of not forcing means you stop trying to turn a no into a not yet just because you are afraid to grieve it. That is clean too. Hard, but clean. Because not everything unfinished is meant to be continued. Not every door is waiting for the right pressure. Not every person is almost ready. Not every pattern needs one more chance. Sometimes not forcing means waiting. Sometimes not forcing means releasing. Sometimes not forcing means accepting that the thing you wanted cannot hold the life you are becoming. That is why discernment matters. Because patience without discernment can become denial, and discernment without patience can become impatience dressed as wisdom. We need both. We need the softness to wait when life is still forming, and the strength to leave when the fruit keeps telling the truth. There is a difference between surrender and giving up. Giving up says, it does not matter. Surrender says, it matters, but I cannot control it. Giving up closes the heart. Surrender opens the hands. Giving up becomes numb. Surrender stays honest. Giving up walks away from responsibility. Surrender releases what was never yours to own. That difference matters. Because in human velocity X, we are not becoming people who stop caring. We are becoming people whose care is no longer controlled by fear. That is soft strength. To care and still release. To love and still let go. To hope without gripping. To wait without collapsing. To move without forcing. To stay honest without demanding that life reward you immediately for being honest. Because sometimes we do the right thing and the result is still not immediate. We tell the truth and the relationship still feels tense. We set the boundary and the guilt still shows up. We stop rescuing and the other person does not suddenly become responsible. We stop forcing and the answer does not appear the next morning. That is where many people turn back. They say, see, it did not work. But clean movement is not a vending machine. You do not insert integrity and instantly receive the outcome you wanted. Integrity is not a trick to make life obey. Integrity is how you remain aligned, whether the outcome comes quickly, slowly, or not at all. That sentence matters. Integrity is not how we control life. Integrity is how we remain aligned inside life. So the question becomes, can I still move cleanly? When the reward is not immediate, can I still be honest? When honesty does not instantly fix things, can I still stay soft? When softness is not instantly understood, can I still hold a boundary when the other person calls it cold? Can I still release the outcome without using release as an excuse to stop caring? That is the work. Not easy work, but clean work. Because when you stop forcing, you begin to notice how much energy was being spent trying to make life arrive on your schedule. Energy you can now use to live, to heal, to create, to listen, to rest, to make your next movement cleaner, to become more present with what is actually here instead of constantly arguing with what has not arrived yet. That is where peace begins to return. Not because everything worked out, not because every person changed, not because every door opened, but because your hands are no longer locked around something that was never yours to control. Maybe there is something in your life right now that you have been trying to force. A conversation, a relationship, a change, a healing, a decision, a door, a season, a person, a version of yourself. Maybe you have been calling it effort. Maybe you have been calling it responsibility. Maybe you have been calling it faith. Maybe you have been calling it love. But underneath, your body knows. There is pressure in it. There is gripping in it. There is fear in it. There is a demand hiding inside the hope. And maybe today, the invitation is not to stop caring. Maybe the invitation is to release the grip, to ask, what is mine to do? And then, what is mine to release? What truth needs to be spoken? What boundary needs to be held? What movement needs to happen? What pattern needs to be stopped? What step is actually available today? And after that, what am I still trying to force? What am I still trying to make ready? Because waiting feels too exposed. What am I still trying to pull forward? Because I am afraid that if I stop pushing, nothing will happen. Those are honest questions, and they may not give you an immediate answer. That is okay. Not every question is supposed to produce instant clarity. Sometimes the question itself begins loosening the grip. Sometimes awareness is the first release. Sometimes naming the pressure creates the first breath. And one breath can become movement. The peace of not forcing what is not ready does not mean you become passive. It means you become precise. You stop wasting your strength on the parts that do not belong to you. You stop dragging. You stop begging life to prove something before it's time. You stop turning every delay into an argument with your worth. You stop making someone else's readiness the measurement of your value. You stop letting the absence of an outcome convince you that nothing is moving. You become precise. You ask, what is mine? And you bring that. You ask, what is not mine? And you release that again and again and again. That is not weakness. That is discipline. It takes discipline to stop forcing. It takes discipline to let silence remain silence without filling it with panic. It takes discipline to let someone process without chasing proof. It takes discipline to let your own healing unfold without calling yourself broken because you are still becoming. It takes discipline to wait without resentment, to release without hatred, to act without control, to hope without obsession, to love without ownership. That is soft strength, the kind that does not need to dominate life in order to trust its own movement inside it. And as we come close to the end, there is something I want to say. We are nearing the close of this first season of Human Velocity X. After today, only one conversation remains before this first movement closes, and the next season is already being shaped. We are not leaving the work behind. We are moving deeper into it, from awareness into direction, from recognizing what moves through us into learning how to move with more clarity, more purpose, and more responsibility. I will not say too much yet, but what comes next has already been forming underneath the surface. For now, we stay with the work in front of us, and today, that work is simple to say, but difficult to live. Stop forcing what is not ready, not because you do not care, because you care enough to stop turning care into pressure. Stop forcing people to see before they are ready to receive. Stop forcing healing to finish before the roots are strong. Stop forcing doors that keep telling the truth. Stop forcing yourself to become instantly whole because you are tired of needing grace. Move where movement is yours. Speak where truth is yours. Hold the boundary where clarity is yours. Take the step that is actually in front of you. And then release the part that belongs to timing, to readiness, to another person's will, to the fruit, to life. Because peace is not always getting the answer today. Sometimes peace is finally no longer fighting with the fact that the answer has not arrived. Strength is not always forcing the door open. Sometimes strength is having enough dignity not to break yourself against a door that is not opening cleanly. Wisdom is not always knowing how to make it happen. Sometimes wisdom is knowing when to move and when to let what is still forming finish becoming. That is the peace of not forcing what is not ready. Thank you for spending this time with me. If today's conversation found you where you are, Share it with someone who may need the reminder, not because they need another lesson. Maybe they just need permission to release the grip without releasing their heart. If you are enjoying Human Velocity X, subscribe, follow, and join us on Facebook. Not for noise, for the conversation that continues between episodes. Next week, we close this movement, not by pretending the work is finished, but by asking what kind of life all of this has been preparing us to live. After awareness, after boundaries, after soft strength, after learning not to harden, not to carry, not to force, what does it mean to keep moving as the person you are becoming? That is where we go next. Until then, remember, every day is awesome. We just have to get through it.